Can you feel it? Can you
Mm.
feel it? Can you feel it? I getting better at this thing, I getting a lot better.
You're coming in singing these days.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It must be this political season got me getting all
Full
kind
of
of
songs.
vibes. Full of songs, man. Full of songs.
Okay,
Can you feel?
that's good.
This is the well, that's Jackson 5, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
can you feel it? Michael singing on that one, and then we got
Mm.
election week. So can you feel it? Can you feel it in Barbados? Anyway, hey everybody, how we doing? How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? Welcome to another episode of the Living Room. I was gonna say it as usual, but it's you and me, Andre, with my good friend Philip. Mark at the moment is driving somewhere, taking his son back to university, so he's not with us today. We are cutting
Sends his
some slack
regards,
for
though.
today. He sends
That's
us
good.
regards. We are cutting him a little bit of slack today, just this once, and that's because we like Kyle. But we'll do that. But welcome,
That's funny, eh?
welcome. Yeah, and Sonia too. Welcome to the living room. Hope you guys are doing well wherever you are watching in the world. Thank you for joining us here on
Mm.
this Sunday evening, afternoon, morning, depending on where you are. As I said before, this is the living room. You are on the We Global platform. If you haven't already, hit like, hit follow on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube as well. If you haven't already, follow us and just help us grow this platform. This is the living room. We love to have good Caribbean conversations, and we're gonna have another one today, which I think is gonna be very interesting. So thank you guys for joining us. Also, tag some friends, hit share, bring them into this conversation because I think this is gonna be a really, really, really good one. So thanks again for joining us. Let's get straight to it. How are we doing, man?
I doing good.
I'm
Yeah,
digging the
good to
blue
catch
there,
up.
by the way. The blue is very crisp and bright.
Is well, there's one of my favorite colors, the royal blue, blues and greens. Those are my
Oh,
colors.
okay. You even put the
And
royal in front of it. Okay. So it's
oh
royal
oh
blue.
oh,
Okay. I thought you were going to get into one of these. This is
a republic
midnight
blue.
something or something like that. Ooh. Wasn't even thinking there, but no, you're saying it. Really, we
Maybe
should
that's
drop
what
the
it should
royal.
be.
We should drop
Republic
the
blue.
royal now and call it,
Well,
yeah,
work for
midnight
Andrew.
republic. Ooh. You're going low already. That's early. I think he dropped the royal, but not by choice. And
You
I
dropped
don't
him.
think we want to put ourselves in that company as
No,
the
no, no.
reason why we would drop the
Yeah,
royal. So
maybe not. Yeah,
let me not go there, But
yeah,
that should have been drop every sentence. But
yeah.
anyhow, that's another conversation.
Mm.
Anyway, what do you mind get to this week, man?
Oh, this week this was my
Hey, Jennifer,
first full week back at work since Christmas.
in the
So,
office or at home?
well, still not in the office. Still
Hey,
working.
Emily,
Still working from home.
from the
Yeah, I haven't
home.
been
Okay.
back in the office for 2 years. Not to sit down and work. I've been in just to meet with people, but not to sit down and do a day of work. I've not done that since.
For 2 years, that's a long time. So I was going in a little bit before Christmas until
Mhm.
this recent quasi not lockdown, but
Fresh,
which is not a
but still
lockdown,
locked down
which is a quasi,
with parties.
yeah, with parties and yeah, but not recent parties, old parties. Although day by day, more and more parties coming out of down the street. So I don't think we can get this report anytime soon because every time you
It,
think you get it, another party to get investigate. But I
I
ain't
was
sure.
I was actually at a party last
Oh,
last night.
oh,
With surprise,
oh, oh.
but
Oh, okay. Allowed
yeah,
under the current dispensation.
yeah,
Allowed right
yeah.
now.
It was allowed. It was properly done. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Something tell me I don't. I think UK gonna have a new prime minister come February, March.
I think so too.
Something tells me so.
I think so too.
If he lasts the next 2 weeks, I will be really, really surprised. Or he'll be announcing resignation and a general
Mm.
election to come at some point in time.
Oh, for sure.
But I can't see 2, 3 weeks without him saying he's resigning and
Man,
setting a
all
timetable.
this investigation talk is sort of buying time to set up.
That's all it is. That's
Yeah,
all it is. Oh, in the background, he gone. And we know the Tory party quite ruthless with this kind of thing too.
yeah.
Once the sentiment in the public start to shift, the Tory party don't waste any
It's
time.
time for exit
They
plan.
don't, they don't waste no time at all. Hey, buddy, you gotta go.
Yeah.
Thatcher, John Major,
Mm,
they don't waste any time at all. So I don't
yeah.
expect. And the sentiment is changing. I mean,
It's definitely
day,
changed. Yeah.
day after day, people saying, I'm coming up publicly, and that's to say, you don't even know how many people privately has been happening. But the
Hmm.
MPs here have been sending letters to number 10 or to the Prime Minister's office demanding that the current Prime Minister resign. And that's Tory
Oh,
MPs who've been
yeah.
doing that, by the
His
way.
own people.
Yes. So when they went back on Fridays, I think is what they call constituency meetings or
Mm-hmm.
constituency surgeries, as they call it. And coming out of a lot of those has been the constituents demanding the resignation of
Mm-hmm.
Boris
Mm-hmm.
Johnson. And I could understand why. I mean, you can't
So,
be doing that kind of stuff
no.
at a time when everybody was on lockdown. And I think the one that really hitting the nail right now is that one of the biggest parties was the day before Prince Philip's funeral.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
That is
That's
a
a hard
hard one.
one to
And
come
then
back
the
from.
images of the Queen sat by herself, observing protocols,
Observing protocol.
sat by herself, and that's the picture that they're using every time now.
Yeah,
And it's like, all right, that's it. He upset the Queen and the institution and the firm. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think he can
yeah,
last for much longer. But
yeah. You're saying the only investigation he's doing now is started looking around for were there other parties not from the other side?
I think that's what he's doing now. I'd be surprised if that's the case.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens
We'll
with
see
all
what
that.
comes out.
We'll see what comes out of that.
Yeah.
But and then I think reports coming out today as well are that all protocols and stuff are going to be dropped come the end of this month. Actually, so the UK I think is moving into a phase of living
Let's live with it.
with COVID,
Yeah.
and we can manage it kind of thing. I don't
Yeah,
know if
well,
that's a distraction, but I think that's the plan at the end of this month.
I don't think it's so much a distraction. I think it's reflecting what the published data is suggesting. And it's saying, well, yeah, the rates are still very high, but if we compare hospitalizations and especially deaths in the UK, they're really low. So there's no real
Correlation between
correlation
cases and
between
deaths
those
and
two anymore.
hospitalization.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the aim at the moment. I think the fear of Omicron is that it's twice as contagious as the other variants. So even
Yeah.
though it's less, it impacts the hospitals less in terms of the percentage of people who catch
Hmm.
Omicron end up in hospital because it's twice as contagious. It ends up meaning that the same number of people is in the hospital and not less. But I
And not
think they're
less.
saying that the
Yeah.
UK has passed its peak, so they expect that to come down.
To come down.
So that's
Yeah.
what we're dealing with here. And then the Caribbean, we seeing a similar thing. I think
Trend.
people, yeah, I think people. I don't know if people got the capacity mentally now to continue with this whole lockdown protocols, curfew, all that kind of stuff 2 years on. And especially, I think what's thinking that is the disruption to school and children and what's not.
Yeah, that's a significant thing, to have that ongoing for 2 years and so on. Um, yeah, I mean, governments definitely need to look at that. But the question is always going to be there. Okay, we want to break and we want to change, but is it the right time? Can we or and how do we reflect on lessons learned? Because there are plenty of opportunities. I was saying to someone today, working from home and not going into the office presented me with a lot of opportunities. I actually connected with more people from work than if I was in the office, right? Because when I'm in the office, I just connect with people who are immediately around me or immediately in my team,
Right.
right? But from at home, my thought of a network became interest or people that share interests with me that I need to connect with. And that became, and I had more frequent interaction with them,
Oh, okay.
even
So
if
it
we
didn't
weren't
matter
working
if
on
you
something
weren't seeing
together.
them. It was the
Exactly.
interaction, even
Yeah.
via Zoom or Slack or I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody's used Skype these days, but that might be showing my age. But I think it's
No, I
all
don't think that
Slack
happens.
and different things. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody's used that. But anyway, right. Zoom and different things like that. But yeah, you're right. You're right. And I think the thing with the kids in the Caribbean is probably the thing that really concerns me the most.
Mm.
And I know across the region, most countries have some form of in person learning or what have you. I think except for Barbados. Over the last 2 years, I think Barbados is still the only place in the. I could be wrong, subject to correction, so please don't kill me. And I'm being political by saying this. I'm just observing.
Okay.
I think Barbados is probably the only place that hasn't had in-person learning for quite some time now, and that can be good. I can't
Yeah.
see that that's a good thing as far as the kids are concerned. And pretty much things are relatively open as far as people needing to go back to work and parents or what have you, but you have the kids at home. And I can
Yeah.
only imagine that that's difficult for quite a lot of people.
It probably is, and yeah. I was always trying to think back. If I was a child back then, we
Hey,
had something like that. It was a different time. It was
mean it
a,
well. You didn't do any work.
no.
I think if I would have put my 12, 13, 14 year old self in today, I didn't do any work neither.
Nah.
I
Nah.
yeah. I didn't check in for that. Not that say that I wouldn't reap the consequences later,
We
but
would.
I
We would.
didn't do any work at that time
Fancy
either.
man.
Yeah. I'd be pure dance things. But we'll see. But no, you ain't. He's a calm man. So perhaps whatever dusting that happens up there in the up the hill there, so might have been good. But you never know, because apparently, according to you, different things has happened up there. I don't know.
Have I ever? Okay, yeah. Maybe I've said that. Maybe
Oh, you insinuate it. What did it do? I don't know.
that's probably a different topic.
Yeah, I think I gotta bring that in for proper conversation one time in the room and have a
Yeah.
chat with
What's
her.
so special about Combermere?
Short answer, nothing. So that'd be a pretty short show.
Fair enough.
Just saying. I know,
Yeah.
but you might long it out. I don't
No,
know.
no, I know what's special about it, but
Is it-
I say a different show.
Different show. I think we should have one of these shows one of these days. We should do that one of these days.
We
You
got
never
enough
know.
stuff.
You never know. Not about commerce specifically. This whole school conversation that's going on in Barbados. Because I don't know if other islands in the region or other countries
It
in the
might be
region.
a
Guys,
good-
let me
good
know.
question. Might be
Might
a
have
good
a lot of different things happening and a lot of talk and competition and stuff. But certainly for us in Barbados, is a lot of talk about these things. But anyway, so it's election week in Barbados, right? So one of the things that we wanted to do, and you guys would have been with us for the past couple of weeks. I know initially we weren't going to be doing any shows in January. We picking up in February, but that got all skin out on the 27th with the announcement. And we've been just having these conversations about elections, not just in Barbados, about elections within the region
Within the
as
region.
well.
Yeah.
And last week we talked about whether or not elections are really don't really have much depth to them as far as how people speak, what they put forward, the ideas, the whole process of the stump speeches and all that kind of stuff. And we had some good conversation around that. With a nod to the fact that in Barbados for the first time the two major parties are being led by women. So we had four ladies in last week and I had a
Oh, that was good.
fantastic conversation.
chat.
Wait, I hear we even get a mention on brass stats this week too, yeah.
Yeah,
in
the three young,
Barbados.
three young fellas.
Moving on
And the
up.
women.
You understand? I hear so. They already mentioned we though. But they mentioned the women that was on. But that's
Yeah,
all right.
They were
We can
definitely
take
mentioned us.
Yeah,
but they did refer to us as the three young fellas.
three young fellas, and then
In some show it called the front house or something like that.
exactly, and then especially the women, they really focus on the ladies.
Especially women,
So they kind of dismiss we fat, but that's all right. We take credit for actually bringing
fine.
on the guests.
That's facilitation.
Yes, exactly.
that's
And
what
that's what
we're-
we're doing.
yeah,
We
that's what we're doing.
facilitating some good Caribbean conversation. So
Conversation.
this week, we were thinking, what do the youth think about this whole process? Not just of election, but politics in general. What are their opinions? Are we listening to them? I don't know, but they'll tell us when they come on. So we thought, let's get some people from Barbados. Yes, obviously, because it's
Yeah.
elections in Barbados, but kind of use that as the anchor to look across the region. So we also have Antoine from Jamaica who's joining us, and Zico from Trinidad. And along with those two, we have Crystal, Khalil, and Lachey. Hope I got Lachey right, from Barbados. And we're gonna just have this conversation around politics. What do the youth really think? So that's what we're gonna do. We can listen again. We just facilitating, and we can have a good conversation around that. So let's bring the guys in. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
How's it going? Zico, see you there. Crystal, Khalil, Antoine, and Lachey. How's everybody doing this Sunday afternoon? Everybody good? Had their lunch? I know y'all probably get a little sleep. I know when you Caribbean,
Went
get
to
a
the
little
beach.
sleep. Went to the beach, all that kind of stuff already. So I hope so. Anyway, hope it ain't raining too bad wherever y'all at. Let's hope is good. It's good. But look, thanks guys for joining us here, and guys in the audience, you can thank them for joining us as well. I think what we really wanted to do is have a perspective of young people who might be new to the voting process, as you are this year, Lachey, people who might have voted a few times, but people also who, you know, what is it that the youth, what's your relationship with politics? What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? We just having a conversation around youth and politics. So hope you're all ready for that conversation. Lachey, let's start with you. I understand you're going to be voting for the first time this year in Barbados.
Wednesday.
Yes, I
Tell
am.
me, are you excited? One, have you been paying attention? Is it one of these days I can't wait to vote? Or the parents telling you people die for this, so go and vote so you don't have a choice?
Have you been practicing writing the letter X?
Without touching the lines. Tell me how you're feeling.
I am excited, but I'm also very nervous because I am afraid that I will mess up the X.
Wow. No
I,
pressure.
however, I haven't been practicing. I haven't been practicing. I'll go in there and I'll wing it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But I would say I am not really into politics, but since this is my first time, I've tried to pay attention. It's not something that holds me very long. So I like nice synopsis. But it has been a very interesting time. I agree that silly season is the right name for it because
Okay.
a lot has happened that should be questioned. But all around, I am excited and yeah,
Yes,
I
like,
don't know.
okay. We're going to come back to what you've
What
observed
excited means.
and what excited means. Yeah, because we want
Okay.
to understand that a little bit more. And Khalil, what about yourself?
Yeah, it's my first time voting also. And so I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I have spent I was born in 2003, and the election happened that year, I think just a few months before I was born. And so I wasn't involved in that one.
I
But
don't worry,
but
you're really very
certainly
genius.
That's how you're doing the math.
but certainly from 2008
But I like to swear.
I attended the meetings from 2008, really got involved in 2013,
Wait.
2018, and
Hold on a second. You said you were born when?
03.
2003.
And you attended the meeting when?
And 08, yeah.
Okay.
So,
you
5 years old.
Um,
and you
yeah,
caught the bug
thereabouts.
for politics then?
Yeah. I did. And so
Wow.
then it started there. Obviously, I can't. I the memories are frayed. But certainly from 2013. Well, between 2008 and 2013, that's when the interest really developed. And then in 2013, it took off with that election, and 2018 again, and now we're here. So that the ability to actually participate in the process is delicious. Um, so yeah, it is quite a delicious prospect.
Nice. Nice.
Excellent.
Particularly because since about 2017, I am told quite frequently, that because I don't vote, I really ought not to express a political opinion. But I guess that at this particular juncture, that argument has been liquidated. So if for no other reason, I look forward to it for that reason.
Okay, we can come back to some of that. But I like the use of language. By the way, Philip is a poet, so that's why he's
Yeah.
getting excited by the way how you.
I've never heard anyone talk about elections as delicious. And I like food too.
Yeah, exactly. But I like that because I want to come back to what about 2008 really pricked your interest, and then obviously from 2013 on where you really got involved, and I presume from that age you really started analyzing and listening to what people are saying and does it make sense and that kind of stuff. So it would probably be good to come back to that. Zico in Trinidad. Tell me how things going in Trinidad. I'll be honest, from my side, things in Trinidad pretty serious, and the theater of politics is one that never fails to deliver something that keeps your interest going. How are young people feeling about politics in Trinidad and Tobago?
I think a lot of young people in Trinidad and Tobago probably feel a little bit disillusioned by politics. I'm not sure if your listenership would be familiar with the landscape in my country, but the voting is tribal because, of course, the ethnic composition of Trinidad and Tobago is divided. We have about a half East Indian population, about other half is predominantly black. So people traditionally vote along those lines. I do think that we are in the middle of a moment right now where some schisms are starting to show, but it's very hard to I guess break a duopoly.
Yeah.
So um, we would have to kind of we're 3 years away from the next election, so we would have to really see how things develop over the next 3 years before we know whether or not a third party might be able to disrupt, so to speak. But a very interesting recent development took place where there was a an election in Tobago for the Tobago House of Assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, he is from Tobago.
He's from Tobago.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Didn't have much of an
the
impact.
uh, a homegrown Tobagonian party that um, ran against the government's party for the THA elections, and it was a clean sweep for this new party against the PNM, which is led by a man from Tobago. So
Tobago.
that's we would have to sort of look at that to see what is going to come from it.
Mm-hmm.
People are, I think, pretty frustrated. Of course, COVID is at play in Trinidad like everywhere else, so everything is kind of. I think that is sort of making people change how they approach politics because
Yeah.
that is taking precedence over some of the traditional, I guess, tribalistic um,
And are you
impulses.
saying
So
that shift? You said people are changing, but is that shift also? Can we also look at it generationally as well? Are we seeing younger people being the driving force behind that shift, besides just sort of circumstances of political makeup? Is there
I think
something happening there as well, besides the
I
ice
think
cream?
a lot of so the last time there was a major disruption would have been about 10 years, about 10 years ago or so when um, the COP would have come onto the scene, which was a sort of a middle party that tried to bridge the gap, sort of
Mm-hmm.
represented a kind of middle class interest group that tends to swing back and forth between the two main parties. And that party was eventually subsumed into the UNC, which is the
UNC. Yeah.
traditionally East Indian party.
Yeah.
And since then, there hasn't really been a third option. I think that COVID um, has radicalized people in many different
Oh,
ways. And I think I'm seeing people who may have traditionally aligned in one way or the other, um, predicating their beliefs on how they feel about COVID, government response to COVID.
okay. So
Obviously,
that's also a
Caribbean
factor.
islands follow trends. We see what's happening in the United States. It tends to
Yeah.
ripple
Yeah.
down here. And me personally, I feel like there's a sort of a growing appetite for a Trumpian
Something else. But let's
populist.
come back to that. I know
Yeah,
we
yeah,
talked about
yeah.
that later. Let's come back. Let's hold
That's
that a
a
little bit.
that's the main point.
Crystal, I think you might be responsible for some young people taking notice beyond the platform theater with some stuff that you would have done
You,
a
you're
little
trying to
while
say
ago.
Crystal is an influencer?
I think she has been actually. I actually think she has been.
I think so too.
So,
Yeah.
so tell me, what are you seeing in Barbados? Do you see young people? And let's take this particular election cycle, but just in politics in general as well. Do you find folks are saying, "Hey, we don't want that theater anymore. Let's look at the real substance of what people are saying." Are you seeing that? Are those what young people are doing in Barbados at the moment?
Hi, thanks for having me on the program, first of all.
No
And
worries.
in answer to the question, it depends on which class of young persons you ask, because like with any other group, you're going to have different viewpoints. Some persons are very interested, some are in the
Yeah.
middle ground, and some just care about the cost of living, which
True.
the reality is
True.
all of
True.
it still stems back, unfortunately, sometimes to the political decisions that are made.
Yeah.
So whether you can go in your smaller groups and you try to agitate for change, whether it's through environment and
Hmm.
all these other things, as you would have had on one of your previous shows, you have a class of persons who care very much about the environment, and then the minister makes a decision where the cruise ships are able to anchor down and damage the coral reefs and what comes of that. So,
Hmm.
in spite of all of the agitation you may do for your particular interests, in so many cases, the final result in being able to make real change ends back up at a political decision. And being able to recognize that regardless of what your interest is, we still have to agitate for better from our politicians. I think because of the profession that I'm in, I've been able to bring some clarity as to what some of the governance issues, some of the accountability and ethical issues may have been damaging that ability to be able to say, like, why aren't we making more progress? Why isn't there real change? And I think that there are more young persons who are better able to understand why they are impacted, why they're affected the way they are, as opposed to it just being a feeling, but you're not able to really put words to the feeling to be able to express or articulate yourself in a space so that you can be heard and taken seriously. So hopefully I've given more persons the ammunition to be able to put forward their case and agitate for change. And I think it's reflected not only in the way how persons would have voted in the last elections, but in the commentary that you will see on some of our media platforms. When you go on Barbados Today or The Nation or even the underground media houses with the TBCs, the white collar crimes, all of these places where persons are articulating in a way that I
Yeah.
never expected to see. They want accountability from the politicians. They want to know what happens when you raise something in the Auditor General report. They want to know why
Yeah.
nobody ain't getting hold for certain things, why things aren't being paid back. And we expected a lot more from the administrations that we have. And I think that's what makes the disappointment a little bit more bitter, because with all of this increased awareness, we were probably hoping for a change that would
Yeah.
match our expectations.
Yeah. I'm hoping it will drive change though, because when you start to get that sort of social interest and awareness, you're going to see some change. So that's exciting. And Antoine, over in Jamaica, tell us a bit about yourself, what you get up to, and if any of what the others have said kind of resonates with you.
All right. So hi, my name is Antoine, and what Crystal has said, there are two groups, and I also agree with that. There are persons who are actually youths who are interested in politics, and they have youths who do not want to hear anything about politics. And I believe that I am one of those youths. I don't really talk about politics. So this is actually my first conversation about
Yeah.
politics. And I also believe what I do believe is that there's a gap between between youth and the government, right?
Okay.
So even
Hmm.
if we are given the opportunity, we're given the platform to speak, and we raise our points and we say, okay, we see climate change and we want to fight it, and the governments, they tend not to hear us in a sense. We are just given the platform and we speak and we say what we think is best to help the country. And then
Yeah.
when you look now, there is no change. And I believe that even in campaign, they say all these things, to get our attention, to get our votes. And when you look, and when they're instated, we're not seeing any changes. And I believe that this is one of the reasons why you, especially I'm talking about myself right now,
Yeah. No.
I
Go ahead.
have no
Yeah, man.
interest in politics because I am about climate change. I'm a science
Okay.
student, so I am about the environment, and when I see things like this, and I'm not seeing any method put in place to assist to mitigate these effects that climate change and other environmental disasters are happening, right? I get frustrated, and so are talking
Oh.
about politics our government overall.
That's interesting. What got you interested in climate change and the environment?
As a youth, or as a youth leader, I'm more into, what would I say now? First, as a science student, let me say this. Bio is
Okay.
like one of my core subjects, and so
Okay.
when I learn things like biodiversity, these are topics that pique my interest. And as a person who does volunteerism as well, I see where I am able to assist, but I'm just one person, and I can't just do what I can do. I partake in beach cleanups, and I also spread awareness. But as we can see that there are so many detriments happening to the environment, to Earth itself, right? I remember doing a beach cleanup, and I visited a beach that I actually went to 2 years back, and I saw evidence of the the sea level rising, basically. And a lot of persons, they don't see this because they think it's natural, but they don't know that it's our action, it's human actions that is actually causing these
Causing.
things to happen.
No, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Zico, I know the climate change and what have you. That's an area that you look at as well. And you were at COP this year in Scotland.
Yeah.
How was that received when you brought back some of your information to Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm assuming you probably attempted to raise some of your concerns to the level of government. Was it received? Was it well received? Were you listened to? Be honest, man. You're in the living room. You can say what you want. Don't worry about it.
So what I would say about being at a climate conference like COP, um, our countries as small island developing states go to a kind of conference like that with a huge task before them. Right, our delegations are a lot smaller. We have to pool our resources through institutions like the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS. So heading into that space, it was at first very difficult for me to even let's say that the delegates were very, very busy, right?
Okay.
So
So this
what
is
I
a read
would
between
know,
the line statements, I sense.
yeah, what I would what I would note is that I wrote different types of pieces, and I think I did write one piece that maybe was somewhat critical. And I think towards the end of my COP experience, and I did have an opportunity to really um, talk to the local delegation. But what was interesting for me is being there and realizing that there weren't really any independent journalists from the Caribbean or
From the
even small
Caribbean.
island developing states
Right.
at the kind of
Yeah.
conference. So the type of messaging that was being sent back home for the most part would have been coming from communications representatives
From
slash
bigger
journalists who
orgs.
would have been attached to the delegations. So it was overwhelming for me to realize the magnitude of the task ahead of me, the lack of access, both through the official COP channels, because of course COVID gave created an opportunity to lock journalists out, and then of course the delegations themselves are going to make time for a journalist, in my case, one who were not very familiar with. So I stand saw an opportunity to cover COP from a Caribbean perspective.
Yeah.
And for me, it turned into like a networking experience where I started to really look into the situation of each island and see if I could tell a collective story of the small island state, the Caribbean priorities at COP26. I would say there was some ability to, I guess, get the message to readers back home in Trinidad and Tobago. But interestingly, a story that I would think might have been a major scoop, I would send it back home and it wouldn't get a prominent placement in the newspaper. But there were a few stories that did. And even beyond what I was writing about, I thought that this year was the first time that I'd seen climate stories being treated with that level of prominence. So I know that right now we're discussing, we'll be looking into what's happening with Barbados. The Barbados election. I thought
Mm-hmm.
a critical moment for me at COP26 was to listen to Mia Motley's speech and to see the impact that had.
Yeah.
Now, there is an investigation to be done into whether the action matches the rhetoric,
Mm.
right? That would require a lot of investigation. But if you look at things from the perspective of people in the Caribbean tuned into the issues surrounding climate change, and what would it take to get the people at home to take it seriously? Because if people at home aren't paying attention, then there's not going to be any demand on leaders to address the issue, right?
Yeah.
We need to put our attention on it. We need to understand that climate change is happening now, and most people in the Caribbean don't get that. So whether or not the rhetoric matched the action, I think it was pretty
We got to take a
important
look at that.
that the
Yeah,
rhetoric happened and that
I go
that
with
a
you on that.
Caribbean leader was given such a prominent placement. Because
Yeah.
for the first time, many people in the Caribbean would have listened to one of our own leaders speak on such an issue so passionately. For many people who I know people who have been radicalized by anti-vax, pro-Trump type
Yeah.
type of content,
Mm-hmm.
who really and truly are just drawn to seeing a leader who can exude strength. And they were celebrating Mia Motley's speech about climate action. And these are people who I've never seen post anything about climate action before. Some of them have even been
Wow.
posting about it being a Chinese hoax and all sorts of other ridiculous conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I do think that optics matter at the very least for sort of um, lighting a spark. So I'm hoping that now that a lot more people in the Caribbean have been exposed
To
to
that.
the reality that climate change is happening now, that some of the problems that they're already trying to deal with are actually attributable to climate change.
Climate change. I
I'm
agree.
hoping that the conversation can move forward. Because if the conversation moves forward, then the action will eventually be forced.
We
Yeah.
follow. Yeah.
No, I'm with you there. I'm with you there. Khalil and Lachey, two things that I think Crystal brought up, and both you alluded to as well, was seeing our politicians being held accountable. And that whole issue of accountability, and even Zico alluded to it there just now, speeches versus actions and what have you. Are you seeing accountability? Let's start with Lachey, and if not, how would you like to see that accountability put in action? How would you like to be able to voice that you are not happy and then see things in action? What are you seeing from your vantage point?
I find a lot of politicians avoid accountability. I find more youth, um, not only youth, but middle-aged people are trained to hold them accountable, and they are, but more or less, avoiding it. For example, when we had the whole gun violence thing due to songs, to me that was very an unfair thing to do to those artists,
Okay.
because listening to a song is not going, yes, music has influence on us, but it's not going to just change the average man into a killer. And then for you to berate those artists, you had them on the front of the paper like criminals, wanted criminals, and then to turn around a few months later and use those same lyrics, use those same people in your political campaign, and just kind of smooth it. You didn't comment on it. You didn't come out and say it was wrong of me to do this to these people. Nothing. You
Carried
shove
on.
the entertainment industry down the drain. And as yes, tourism is big for us, but we fail to realize how important the entertainment industry is to our economy. And we kind of just, for the whole pandemic, they were, you know,
Left the fame for themselves, kind
yeah,
of thing.
they
Good
you
line
you
was that.
kind of cast them away. You never gave them a second chance. You didn't look back at them. DJs crying at you. People that self like you just kind of cast them away. You never made any comment. You didn't think twice about it. Nothing about that. I find that they are avoiding accountability, and better needs to be done. And the opposition has had the opportunity to kind of get the current governments at these talking points, and they themselves
Haven't done anything to you.
miss the mark as well.
Okay, and
Go ahead, Phil.
no, I was going to say, and that point of politicians avoiding accountability, how does that make you feel as a voter?
It it makes me doubt them, because there's nothing wrong with saying that you were wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying sorry. To me, that's the least you could do when you do something wrong in a situation.
Agreed.
You could have said, okay, maybe this wasn't the right response, and go from there. But you cut out any conversation. You just stop, and you kind of just move on. And we as a society, we allow that to happen too. We fight in the beginning, but we just give up. We go silent, and then everything just. Thank you,
Yeah.
Didi.
Nice.
No, I in
engagement.
spirit of conversation, I really like your point regarding the songs and the reaction from a political perspective. I saw someone there ask if it was the politicians that put them on the front page, or if it was the media. Well, it's a combination of both. It's a combination of both. A story was
the
created.
nation put them on the front, but then
Yeah.
media
That was
also
a
made
response,
statement.
correct. That was a
Yeah,
response
yeah.
to the statement that
There's a
Prime
response to the
Minister made.
statement. So the story was
Yeah.
created. Of course, it can get on the front page of the paper. So
Yeah.
I don't really understand that particular question. But anyway, I like what you said there about you berated them. Some might say rightly. In your case, you might say wrongly so. But then you turn around. And in one case, and we in the living room, so we call names, right? And in one case, where me and Molly would have asked for apologies, you get some apologies from some, but then the head entertainer that actually didn't apologize is the one that you use for your political campaign song. I don't get it. It don't make no sense. On the conversely, on the other side, you got one of the more senior people there, which is Seeley, using one of the most vulgar songs of the last couple of years, changing a couple of the lyrics, but then using it after launching your campaign with a gospel concert, but then using it as your campaign song. So I mean,
It
as
was
you,
unfair. Doesn't
you-
make any sense.
it doesn't make any sense. You put me as a middle-aged person, so as one of them middle-aged people, I confused like you. I confused like you, Lachey, and I 100% agree with you. But that's the kind of double standard and not being held accountable. Khalil, you wanted to jump in on that?
I think sometimes we rightly so, it's justifiable. Rightly so, we hold politicians to a high standard. But politicians are people, and people, generally speaking, avoid accountability. That is people at work, people in the private sector, in the public sector, children, old people, women, men. So people avoid being accountable as a general thing. It's unfortunate. That's the reality. I think that in the Caribbean, I've written about the need for us to really make better use of our parliaments, and really enhance the kind of parliamentary accountability. Our parliaments are small, so that makes it a little more difficult. In many instances, many of the members of our parliament are members of cabinet, so therefore they can't really hold themselves accountable. But that's why I think parliamentary reform is really important. But at the end of the day, it's the society at large that really needs to do the hard work of holding politicians accountable. People talk a lot about corruption, but politicians don't corrupt themselves. So that when you have a politician who wants to do the right thing and so on, but then your opponent is giving out televisions and iPads and money, and honey, milk, gold, frankincense, and myrrh,
Cornbread
and
and
then they
biscuit
will win.
politics, as we call it. Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
out here? I live in St. Michael North, and I would also take those things.
Oh, frankincense and myrrh.
You're being honest,
Right.
Lachey. You're being honest.
But yeah, and that is the reality. So that we have a culture now. I have canvassed in Barbados, and I can tell you that people look at you in whatever color shirt you're wearing with the slogan on it, and they tell you, if you come here with money. And so that we talk
And you
about
looked at him and
corruption
told him,
at
but
the
he's only five? He's only 5 years old.
sorry.
And you looked at him and said, but he's only 5 years old.
Oh.
um, but but yes, so we talk about corruption at the high levels of politicians and and corporate, but well, the corporate Caribbean and so on. But at the end of the day, it is us in the wider society have a responsibility also, to say no to that kind of thing. So because so long there's no supply without a demand for it,
Demand and supply.
and and
Okay.
and
Interesting point.
and we have to be sanguine about the fact that there is a demand for corruption among the citizens of the Caribbean. That is a fact.
Really?
That is a
There's a
fact.
demand for corruption, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
there is. Yes, I mean we're not
Not
gonna
from you.
call it that because
No,
that
You no
sounds
you gotta
terrible.
Khalil,
I like you, Khalil. I like you, but you
Khalil,
gotta
can you
explain that now.
explain?
You
Yeah,
gotta explain that. What do you
No,
mean by
so then
a demand for corruption?
what it is, in other words, that well, not well, not we, but many of us,
Mm-hmm.
are we are
You're talking
demanding
about
the beginning,
Material.
the starting point without appreciating the final product. The final product is the corruption. But you when you're demanding the iPads and the televisions and the paying of the light bills, people tell you that they want their utility bills paid, that they're demanding literal hard cash. So that all of these
But where is
things
the
that
corruption?
people
Are you saying
want.
people are saying they
but
want that in
I,
return for their vote? Is
no,
that what you're
I
saying?
think
Yes,
what let me think. I think what Khalil
yes.
is saying here, and then I'll let Zico speak as well. But I think what he's saying here is
And
because
Crystal, I
of
see
the
she nodding
demand
head.
for material,
Mm-hmm.
right? That leads to this sort of
Instead of kind
indirect
of going
demand
with the
for
right
corruption.
person or the person who's
Yeah,
trying to do,
So that
we
if
go, we
so
let
that
people buy our
exactly,
food. Mm-hmm.
the love of
we are
money being the root
demanding.
of all
So
evil.
that's not all voters or anything of that, anything like that. But I can tell you anecdotally, a good set of voters demanding material things, but so then perhaps they're not thinking about where these material things have to come from. Then there are no bottomless pits of money, and so that yes, we have challenges at the highest levels, but the problem is a bit of a chicken and the egg kind of scenario. I can't tell you where the problem started or who is contributing to it. I think that both that the supply and the demand for are both contributing to the problem, and
Okay.
we never address that. We always talk about the politicians and the business people, and we ought to. Don't get me wrong. We ought to talk about that, and we ought to do the integrity legislation and the campaign finance and all of that stuff. But we
But we never
never
say
do
no.
the
We
hard
never say
work.
no.
But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
we never do the hard work of saying ourselves that it is only about other people. We have to take accountability too.
Okay, I read you there, but we can come back to that. Zico, before we come to you, Crystal, I saw you nodding there just now. How
I,
do you want to comment on that part of it?
I was nodding because it is a difficult situation to comment on, to place blame any one place. But in a similar fashion to when I break the speed limit and some police won't drag me in traffic court, the same way how if I go and steal something from a supermarket, I getting dragged into court. This is no different. We have for a long time only recognized certain types of crime as ones that we would swiftly punish. And there are other things that just, as we pointed out, they go uncorrected. And yes, everyone has a role to play where this is concerned. But I think the biggest problem is the lack of education as to where everybody's role is. And also, to me, the society, in a sense, I would give them the least blame because the circumstances that most persons find themselves in, where they are struggling to pay, they have to be choosing between food and buying a tablet for their child to go to school and everything else. I personally am not upset at anyone in those circumstances who look for a handout because it's the one time of this entire period that you can say, all right, at least this month I get in the ease.
Some kind of
In
relief.
my
okay.
financial situation, I get in some kind of
But
relief.
the politician
I
has to choose
let
between
you
winning or losing. Sorry,
I
sorry, Crystal. Go ahead.
I understand your point. I understand that's why it says a chicken and egg, because then good politicians who come in who are trying to do it the right way are faced with a systemic issue that goes beyond what they are coming in now and trying to do, and they're trying to figure out how, in this particular scenario, how do I appeal to persons who are desperate and need this one time that they can get relief, when for me to be able to give them that, I would need to go and get sponsorship from a business who's going to expect something from me in return. And we see where the cycle is and how do we break this. And that is not just a problem in Barbados. That is a, I could definitely speak for majority of the Caribbean. We face that all
Agree.
over the place. And we are struggling to figure out where and how do we break this. We have a public accounts committee that is supposed to review the findings that come out of the Auditor General's report. And the person who's the head of that is the leader of the opposition, who, for all intents and purposes, sometimes is a part of the problem that is
Political
raised in the
machinery.
same Auditor General's report. And we expect to see progress and accountability and everything come out of it. And I think the citizens are hoping for it. Some of the honest business persons are hoping for it, because the reality is the honest business persons pay a price for not participating as well. Because then when government contracts come out and opportunities come
You
out,
get missed.
they get missed. And then it is a cycle where we are finding ourselves deeper and deeper entrenched in the consequences of the corruption. But no one wants to be the one to sacrifice and say, you know what, I'm going to be the politician that does it the right way. I'm going to be the citizen who ignores the bribe. I'm going to be the business person, because there's so many people participating in it that you're in a minority group that gets shafted. That's just the reality. And until persons who have, for all intents and purposes, made it out of the rat race come back and say, you know what, we are going to be the ones that sound our voice. This is why I sometimes am a bit upset with the professional bodies I'm in, because as we kind of have that shield to be able to speak out on behalf of the organizations that we are in and say this is wrong, this is what we should be doing, and advocate and agitate a lot more to protect the more vulnerable parties in this whole chicken and egg situation that we've created. But unfortunately, either the voices who have the knowledge are not charismatic enough to be heard, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Some of them just are too dry or boring. They're gonna lose the interest of the people, because it's really not the language that we speak isn't something the everyday person is going to pick up. It's the same thing
Okay.
as when you talk
Okay.
about COVID and the doctors try to have the conversation and they get too technical. They lose the average person.
You lose the average
Furthermore,
person.
you lose
The jargon.
professionals furthermore sometimes. So
Yeah.
this is why it also comes back to how we educate persons and not recognizing why even our current prime minister is so loved, because she can speak in a way that appeals to so many different persons. But my
Good
fear
point.
is the substance underneath it, because she's just one woman. When you come back now, and as Zico would have mentioned, these persons may be investigating whether our words line up with our actions. And that is where my fear comes, that we have done a wonderful job of being able to convince persons of certain things. And then when they look further under the surface, certain things are lacking. And
I like.
unfortunately, for me, the other alternatives that we have neither substance or flair. So then we end up
Oh, wow.
No, good point. You gotta actually captivate. You gotta at least be speaking
you
interestingly
have
enough
to
to get
be.
people to listen to you. Otherwise all points would be lost. But good
Correct.
points there, Crystal. Zico, you wanted to jump in on that a little bit. I saw you there ready to jump in on
Yeah.
Khalil for a
Yeah.
second. You
So
wanted to
Khalil
comment on the.
really, yeah, Khalil touched on, I think, one of my pet peeves, right?
All right.
So listening to you talk, Khalil, I hear you diagnosing symptoms of a problem. And to that, I would say you don't go to the doctor for the doctor to tell you that your nose is running. You go to find out why.
Okay.
So the arguments about personal responsibility, people need to do better this, do that. Individual people, like I'm hearing, I'm seeing, the guns trained on people of lower income brackets, lower socioeconomic status, perhaps lower levels of education, right? You
Right.
have to. I think that we need to be aware in the Caribbean that a lot of these problematic behaviors that we think that our citizens display are not unique to people of the Caribbean, right? When you go and you
That's
live in
true.
a European country or you live somewhere else, you will find that people are just as liable to be uneducated, uninformed, ignorant, every and anything under the sun, right?
Yeah.
So there is a going to be a constant state in any society. There's going to always be a constant contingent of people who are going to be irresponsible, or irresponsible or misinformed or whatnot. That's if we look at COVID, for example. Our leaders have this tendency to buff and bully when it comes to trying to get people on board with vaccination, masking, or whatnot. You go
Right.
to, I was just in Glasgow, people are misbehaving far worse
Trust me.
or just as badly as anything I've seen in
No,
Trinidad and
worse,
Tobago.
worse,
Worse,
worse.
yes.
Don't say just
People,
as bad. Worse.
God,
When you
my
put
friend,
when you add the
a
pub culture
leader,
here in
a
the
leader,
UK to
yeah,
it, is worse. Trust me, it's
a
worse.
leader would not dare go on TV and think that he could scold and buff and belittle and demean people into getting back on board, because there is the people over there understand that their government, their public servants are public
Works for
servants. They
them.
serve the people, right? So a leader there wouldn't dare. But over here, we let our leaders lord over us and speak to us like they're a schoolmaster and we're in kindergarten, right? People are going to that human nature is human nature. If there's a certain situation, 30% of people, let's say a stat is that 30% of people are going to take advantage of a loophole in a situation. That 30% is always going to exist. A leader can use that as an excuse to not do what he's supposed to do and to not make better decisions, because that 30% is stagnant. You could try to address it, you could bring the 30% down to 20, but there's always going to be people who take advantage, right? So personal responsibility arguments, for me, I just feel like they are a deflection and a great way to help politicians avoid accountability. And
Wow.
so
Amen.
that for me, this is a huge pet peeve. I don't want to hear about personal responsibility
No,
from
no, good
from people
points.
setting policy. Do your job.
Good point, Zico. Antoine,
Yeah.
tell me about Jamaica. I mean, with your involvement, where personal responsibility, as we talked about, but more about accountability. I think Crystal and some of the other guys touch on a bit of corruption as well. And how are young people reacting, responding, observing this, and what are their views?
All right. So what I believe is that persons go into government for personal gains, or for self sustainability, and they do not see the need to
To help
you
other
know
people.
exactly. And so what they tend to do now is to say, okay, yes, Jamaica has majority of Jamaicans are poor, so poverty is prevalent here in Jamaica, and so of course that's a group that they are going to target, right? And they know that and the the poor sets they tend not to think critically when it comes down to politics in a sense, right? They when they see something on hand and say, okay, I'm getting this, I'm getting $10,000, all right, I'm going to vote. They are not thinking long term. They're say, all right, so I'm getting this now. And I say this is one of the main reasons, and this is one of the big issues here when it comes down to government, right? And that's why at times, the person that you think should not be reinstated are the ones that are actually be reinstated, because persons, they basically buy votes in a sense. And so we, the poor set, we don't tend to look on what is going to happen in the next 10 years or 5 years, or what are some of the things that, is it that we're going to see more farming in Jamaica? Are we going to see the agriculture sector improve? We are not looking at these things. And I believe that what I also believe is that, they need to be educated as well. Yes, we tend to talk about it, but we are not, how, to what extent, right? And so even from primary school, I believe, we should even start talking about politics on a whole, because you need to get the minds ready so that they know what they are going for in the future. Because if I am 19 and I should have had my government ID, and I am not looking forward to having it, to be honest, because I really don't see myself voting, right? Because
You don't see
Okay.
yourself voting.
that's it. Yeah,
Okay.
because I've seen where I don't even know my MP basically. you know. And the only time I
Uh,
see her is when it's probably election time, and she will come, she will give what she wants to give, and then hey, everybody votes for her. So when I see this, and the fact that I'm educated now, and I know what I'm seeing, you know, it just me not to vote, basically.
But okay,
oh,
so on that interesting point, but on that point of not knowing your MP now, that's where I actually put personal responsibility. Because if you might want to vote and you might want to understand, or you're looking around in your area and or in generally in the country as a whole, and to you things aren't right, and recognizing that your input or the input of politicians and politics is going to directly impact that, then for me, I would say personal responsibility to get to know who your MP is on you. And when you
but
find them, then you put pressure on them as to the why and the questions that you need to ask them. That's the way how I look at that.
the, I
No,
not
no, I'm not
consider that.
disagreeing that they shouldn't make themselves known, but I'm saying if they aren't, then there's a part that you play in this as well.
There
That's my
is
thing.
that. I was just going to say one thing on that, because even as educators, you would learn there are many different ways that people learn and people receive information, right? So therefore, educators would have different tactics for getting points over, for getting information over, and knowledge transfer to people. Some people are visual, some are tactile, some require problems, definitions, some people require analogies. You know, there are various ways of doing that. And I think that's what we need to see from a communications perspective in terms of not knowing who your MP is. Yes, I see. Yes, you have the opportunity to look up and see who your MP is, but how direct are the lines of communication?
To me, it's not even looking to see who your MP is. It's making you known to your MP and what you expect and what you demand as a people. Now, of course, Antoine, you're one person. I'm talking as a community. I'm talking of making your MP know that you are there, what you demand and what you expect. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. So
That's
don't
communal responsibility, not
yeah, so don't get me wrong.
personal.
There's a lot that goes into that. A lot of what Zico says, and Antoine said about poverty and perhaps level of understanding, expectation, and to you, Philip, the ability of how do I get to that person? Or how
Oh,
do I
let
find?
Zico set you right.
So there's a lot that goes in. Zico waiting. There's a lot that goes into that. Huh? But you know,
My, my
I get it.
I do
Go
agree
Zico.
that we should try to engage with our representatives. But I think that there's two very important reasons why people don't in the Caribbean. Of course, we all have this Westminster system of government, right? And I think that one of the biggest problems facing our islands is that our legislative branch becomes indistinguishable from our executive branch, right? If your MP is part of the party that's in power, the parliament is so small that there's a good chance that your MP is also a minister. In some cases, your MP is a minister of multiple ministries. Tell me when exactly, how
When
can
is
you
he gonna find
effectively,
time?
when is
Correct.
he going to find, when are they going to find time? How do you be
Exactly.
both a minister and an MP? And so, it's not possible. So that's problem
Yep.
number one. Problem
Problem
number
number one.
two
Yeah, go ahead. I can
is
come back to
that
that again, but go ahead.
we don't vote for MPs. We vote for prime ministers. In the
True.
United
Good point
States of
too.
America,
That's
you get
true.
a ballot and you can choose who you want for your executive branch. You can have a split ticket. You can vote for your president. You can vote for your senator. You can vote different parties going down the line. In Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean islands, you have one vote. So you don't need to know who the MP is. You don't need to care. Your concern is you want to
It's a
make sure that
party.
you
It's
have the
party.
prime minister and party that you want in power.
Which party you believe?
So
Yeah.
Eric Williams once famously said he could run a crapo and the crapo would still win, right? Once he is at the top of the ticket. So we don't know our MP because there's no incentive. There's no incentive to get to know your MP, right?
That's a
And,
good
and,
point.
that's,
No,
and
no.
that's what's
Yeah.
happening with one of our two parties in Trinidad and Tobago right now. I'm not going to say which one, but
Again, you're in the living room. You can say, you know.
okay, one of our parties here in Trinidad and Tobago right now, the leader of that party is currently replacing a lot of the more experienced and seasoned politicians with a small inner circle of hers that is not very well known to the
Okay.
people of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is a complaint that is being raised by some of the members and former members of her own party, right? But at the end of the day, she's going to continue down that, they are going to continue down that road because they know that when it comes right down to it at the ballot box at the
People
next
looking at her.
election, the loyalists are going to vote for the party and they're going to vote
Yes.
for the prime minister that they want. So there's no incentive to know our MPs.
I'm with you there. I'm with you there. Now a lot of what we're talking about now is systemic, right? It's stuff that needs to
Yep.
change. I mean, and like I can't remember who made the point, but I think in general the point was being made is who's gonna step out and make the hard decisions and be the
Yeah.
sacrificial. Now, Khalil would tell me a politician ain't gonna do that because survival is
Of
what
this.
it's really all about. So I guess to Antoine's point about looking long term planning and long term structural changes that's gonna serve the country in the long run, not serve your party, not serve you, but serve the country and its people is really what's needed. It's about who's gonna step out, risk one term by making all the hard decisions.
Yeah.
Lachey, is that something you might want to see?
I,
And would that
I
appeal to you, you think?
it would appeal to me because you get into power to better your country. But I find what's happening is a lot of people are not getting in power for that reason. It's, as we said earlier, is to benefit oneself, to get them further in their career.
Okay.
I find that that's what's happening.
But what makes you
to
feel
me,
that?
because okay, trying to think of a good example now. Um,
Just what makes you feel. It doesn't be anything.
it's kind of, but this may not be the best example, but you surrounding yourself with your friends.
There we go.
It,
That's a perfect example.
instead of you choosing who's the best option, you surround yourself with people. You go and you choose your mommy company, and you choose this body that give you money that help you get into this power instead of you
Okay.
choosing what's going to be best for the country, what's going to be best for your people.
So just
You
behaviors and choices that you're seeing exhibited.
yes.
Yeah.
And there are terms for that. There are things called conflict interest. There's You have to be able to recognize conflicting relationships, and
Yeah.
even within governance structures, that's highly discouraged. And you at the very least are supposed to disclose those things. And it's going to result in exactly what Lachey is talking about. This feeling as though was the best person for the job selected. And if the best person was not selected, how is this best for our country? When there's someone more competent out there who could have done the job, but because this is your friend or your family, they were given the responsibility, and the country is not better off for it.
And no
Because that
rationale is given. You are not
exactly
given a
is a
reason for why you chose this person.
take
You
it
just put them forward and they took the opportunity and
correct.
that's it.
And they don't, and sadly enough, they don't even take the opportunity and do their best sometimes they don't even show up for the job. So really, who benefits? Because then the person who was best for the job, they going if they find the opportunity to leave the country, they will, because they're not taken seriously here. They're overlooked. And then
Yeah.
that brain drain that we're complaining about all the time,
Occurs.
then we can't be vexed when people leave the country because they're getting overlooked because they're not friending up with persons in the right places, and then we're left with a lot of mediocrity, and it continues and it breeds, and then we're left with what we have here, and then we vex with young people for not wanting to get involved in politics because it's become to the point where for you to even have a chance, you have to align yourself with one of these parties who, unfortunately, that system is entrenched. And persons don't want to dirty or sully their reputations by doing that, or they have to have a really strong fortitude to be able to go in and say this is what they're going to do. But this is what I mean by Lachey has the exact feeling that a lot of persons have, but being able to articulate it in a way that persons understand the consequences sometimes might not be there. But it's not as though Lachey's feelings are invalid.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed with that.
Now,
Yeah.
Khalil, I could be wrong, but I think you're probably going to politics is somewhere in your future at some point in time. But we talk about parliamentary reform, and I know you've studied quite a lot on politics across the region. But what we're talking about here, actually, as Mark was commenting just now, hey, Mark, hi, Corbin, how you doing?
Hope you
What
enjoy
we're
it.
talking about is a lot of reforms that will be needed to get us to a place where this generation and probably generations after, because it's not going to happen overnight. Let's be honest about that. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. From what you've observed, why do you think that's not happening? And do you think it should?
Because yes, of course, I want to agree with Crystal and Lachey. Um, but to say once again, I have a lot of experience. I know politicians. And so that we expect a great deal of our leaders, and rightly so. But we have this continuous issue that we expect them to be superhuman. And where do they come from? They don't come from the sky. They come from the society.
Okay.
And that's just and that is just the reality. Politicians are people first and foremost. And
So
so then,
survival is what you're about
so
then, rather than
no, no,
is what
no,
you're
no,
saying.
no, not at all. Not at all. I say that to say that there are good politicians and there are politicians who do unsavory things. I say that to say that we want politicians to take their own personal responsibility. We want them to enact campaign finance reform, and we want them to
Integrity in
do
public life.
integrity legislation. We want them to take personal responsibility to make their own political lives more difficult. But at the same time, we don't want to take responsibility ourselves. That just doesn't line up.
So what do you see
I
as the
yes.
responsibility person should take, Khalil?
But if you
What
want
did you say?
if you
What
want a
did you say,
No,
politician
no,
to
Crystal? I didn't
I'm
hear your question.
asking.
if you want a politician to say that I am going to enact a legislative arrangement to stop myself from getting votes easily, then a similar expectation should exist for a person to say that I am not prepared to sell my vote. I'm not prepared
I think there's
to
two
offer
different
my
things there, though.
franchise.
But
Yeah,
there's
No,
two.
because no,
I
because
agree
you
on this.
said
Yes.
that you have no problem. You said you have no problem with a person who takes a handout or whatever within a particular situation.
I didn't
But
say I
I
at
didn't
have
the
say
no
I
end,
have no
Hey,
No, no,
problem.
no,
problem.
no.
I
You
said
say
I'm
we
not
understood.
surprised.
Yeah,
You
you
Not
say we
sorry,
understand
you
what
understood.
the
don't.
certain
You sorry. Okay, you
Khalil,
understand it.
Khalil,
Well then,
Khalil.
I fail to see. I fail to see the politician is in a position where he has to win an election. He or she has to win an election. And so that they are both engaged in struggles for their respective survival. And people do things, but that is not to justify either side. What I'm saying, rather than harping on at one particular side of the problem, what we need to be addressing are both sides. So I agree entirely with everything that has been said. I'm just saying that we are losing ourselves when we focus solely and entirely upon the political class. um, yes, you expect them to make decent decisions. I agree with that. But at the end of the day, people, we have to make decent decisions too. And we have to balance the conversation. So I
Okay.
agree entirely. I'm not
Crystal?
justifying. I am not justifying political graft. I am just simply saying that we have to be fair to politicians and we have to be fair to ourselves.
Crystal? You
I
want to?
can agree. Yeah, I can agree with Khalil to a point because even within the same auto general report, a lot of persons focus on, let's take the ICBL issue for instance, where because we did have some person on the political side who was locked up for it, but he didn't bribe himself. And where is the accountability then for the persons who paid him the bribe? There's no charges being pressed, and then you have the chief of police saying no one brought charges for them to go and do anything
To
about it. And I'm here
investigate.
thinking, like, how does this then translate for persons seeing this, for the society seeing this, and saying, well, where's the accountability? As Khalil said, it's not just on politicians, and politicians alone should not have been punished for that happening. What happened to the ICBL persons who were involved in paying him the bribe? We shouldn't be waiting for the US to deal with this for us. We really should not. And in certain circumstances, even with the same issue now that is at the Public Accounts Committee for the last however many years that involves the Barbados Transport Board, the persons involved in that have yet to be held accountable. That's not me, or I should say, let me speak for myself. My advocacy does not solely end at the politician. it ends at all of the persons who are participating in facilitating the corruption being held to account. And
Yeah.
yes, the conversation that's sometimes heard loudest is when it is where it comes to the politicians, because they're the ones in the public face.
The
But there's so
prominent.
many persons behind the scenes who are
Do a lot of it.
participating, who are a part of it, who are in high positions. That's why I say sometimes when I say I don't focus on the persons at the lower level, the man who is trying to figure out how to feed his children, I'm not really discussing with them because there's a systemic problem when the real root cause of it is
Is
these
at the top.
persons in these high positions who are setting a very bad tone at the top and then want to put the blame or put the focus on the
It,
small man who's struggling to survive.
yeah, it's
If
not only even about
They're
setting
misusing
tone.
the system as opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah,
trying
I
to
Can I
adjust.
100%
can I
agree.
add on to what?
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Zico.
yeah.
Go
To
ahead.
add on to what Crystal was saying, right? Khalil, you can put public pressure on an individual, right, to do the right thing.
Mhm.
In the form of a leader, you can put public pressure on that individual. You can demand higher standards from that individual. But how do you put public pressure on a percentage of the population that has been historically perhaps deprived of certain things?
Yeah.
How, like if you stand up on a if you stand up on a public platform and declare that X percentage of the population is irresponsible, how do you the only way to fix that has to come from within the system.
Yeah.
You need to
Yeah.
address that. It's a systemic problem that you need to address. The only way to get any solution there is to put pressure on the people
Correct.
who hold the levers of power.
Yeah.
And has
You
that worked though? Because we've been having this discussion for decades. So you're saying that you can do that, but I'm not seeing it that we are doing that because it hasn't worked. That
Because
that
you
Not that it hasn't
politician
expect
worked, it
focus
hasn't been
alone
done.
hasn't worked.
There's a difference. You
because
haven't worked, it haven't been done.
we expecting certain results to happen like magic, and in order to change the system, it's not going to happen overnight. Even when you look at the system of slavery, I am sure that the persons who started the process for freedom of slaves
Didn't
did
see the
not
victory.
see the results of
Didn't
it
see the
in their
results of it.
lifetime. And to fix a systemic problem and think that because it didn't happen in the last 3 years that it isn't working is ignoring the progress that has been made, where we are having more persons advocating for these things. I would tell you 10 years ago, when persons said certain things on the political platform, there were more cheers than persons who were
Cheers.
dissenting. Furthermore, persons
Very
probably
true.
didn't even dissent. No persons can't get up on the political platform and say any and everything anymore. People gonna wash them away, especially on Twitter and all those
Well,
kind of
people
handles.
still do get on platforms and
Of
say any
course,
and
they get,
everything.
of course, but they can't get away with it like how they used to
Yeah.
before. When my
Because
parents were going to political campaigns, nobody used to quarrel about some persons making a sexist, racist, or xenophobic comment. But no, there's an outrage, and that outrage is growing. It may not be to the level where we want it to be, where you can see the change you would like. But to ignore the change from when my parents were going to political campaigns to what I am seeing now means we're not appreciating the progress that we've made in changing these mindsets.
I want to
Crystal,
add
I
to that
wanna
conversation though about why I get the need for balance
Yeah.
in the conversation as far as what you demand from your politicians is the same that you should demand from society as a whole. I guess the reference is that politicians are a reflection of society. They're going to do what they need to do to get in, so to speak. But does that come back to Lachey's point that at the moment we have a set of politicians who are not really in it for the country, but in it for themselves, and how do we put pressure on that? The other thing I would say that is if you're in a position to make laws that's going to impact me, I also want something that's governing you. And that's very different that's very different than to say, it's personal responsibility for me and personal responsibility for the politician. Actually, it's more than personal responsibility for the politician because they're elected to govern. And what they can and cannot do is by far more impactful on society as a whole than me looking after my household and perhaps accepting corned beef and biscuit politics. So I would expect that there's some governance that's on the people in a position to create laws, legislation, and governance cycles and, potential for corruption and contracts and all this kind of stuff. I would expect that there's something that's governing them. No.
Absolutely, but
Yeah.
the question is one of
So I don't put the
scope
two. I say
more
that to
than
say I
of a
don't put the
different
two things in the
principle.
same breath.
it's same
Right.
principle, but it's just a difference in scope. The Barbados
Yeah, but
economy is
I wouldn't,
of
but I
a
wouldn't. I
greater
think it's
scope than a household. But there
so
are,
it's
at the
false
end of the day,
equivalence
there
then.
are certain.
So it's
No,
false equivalent. You
no,
can't put both of them on
it
the
is.
same sentence to say just as you want accountability for politicians, you want accountability from
When
it's
you
very
cut
different. It's
through it
false
all, you are
equivalence.
asking politicians to take accountability in a matter that will damage their own survival. In the same way that you're asking ordinary people to take accountability in things that will endanger their own survival. There are differences in scope, no doubt. Significant differences in scope, but the principle remains the same.
No,
And as
I'm actually asking
Katie has
politicians
there.
to take responsibility in areas where they're governing the entire country and can impact the country, not to take responsibility in areas that's going to impact their survival. I could care less about their survival. I'm looking at
No, but the two
the
are
country.
directly linked.
They are, but what I'm saying is that they should be going higher. Back to Lachey's point, in for self or party versus country. So you want the
And I agree with
underpinning
that.
governance and legislation there. But anyway, carry on.
Yes,
Sorry about that.
I agree.
Go
I
ahead,
agree
Khalid.
with that, and I agree entirely. As I say, I am not saying that we oughtn't hold politicians accountable. I am saying that we ought also in civil society to place a level of
I agree with that.
public
I agree with that.
of public emphasis on the public, and at different levels of corruption. Because Katie has here about how you're paying a government employee to get a passport expedited, or a government employee goes into the office and takes home some of the government's things. Those are at the small level, but those are all tangible aspects of corruption that no one seems prepared to or willing to talk about. My central point, therefore, is one of fairness, and that you can't be or you oughtn't to be unfair to a whole class of people, and place 100%, 110% in many instances of the burden on them when they ought to shoulder 100 with the other 100 that everyone else in society ought to shoulder. That is the central point being made, not at all to detract from the fact that we need to expect higher and better of all people, particularly politicians.
But mathematically that doesn't work because you said the principles you're dealing with the same principle, but the scopes are different, right? And there is a greater
Mhm.
scope of power and influence and access to the sort of reins of power and change for politicians. So therefore, their application of the principle is going to be greater.
A greater percentage.
Exactly.
And no doubt,
No,
when you strip
this
that all away, when you strip all of that away, it comes down simply to their survival, in the same way that it comes down to the survival of anyone else. And again, I'm not negating that.
Looking at the principle
I'm
in
agreeing with the
the
point. I'm agreeing with the point. I'm
I
just
like
I
Khalid.
enlarging upon it.
The same
guys,
could be
I
said that
want
anything
to.
that's done. The person
Uh,
who steals
uh,
something from the supermarket is doing it sometimes for their survival. Does that mean that we should just let them continue to steal for their
But that's the
survival, or
point.
do we?
That is precisely my point.
I like the
We
debate. I
don't
like the
know.
debate. I like the debate. Antoine, you said earlier that you're unlikely to vote. What could change your mind when you look at the political landscape in Jamaica or the behavior of politicians and just politics in general? What could change your mind? What would you like to see happening to encourage you to vote?
First, and I like to see something tackling climate change, of course, and I've been talking
yeah.
about that for a while. You know, that's something that I really do want to see. Also, I want to see the involvement of youth in politics. Yes, we are given the platform, but I want when we are speaking and we are on the platform and we are saying what we need to see, and because we are experiencing life, and we know um, things that are happening in our surroundings. So we have an idea of what needs to be changed. So I also think that when we are speaking, they should actually listen and of course try to find ways in which they can implement them if it is possible. And with these, I definitely believe that I would vote.
Okay.
But you say when you're giving the platform, you want to see that people are listening. How
Is that
would
enough?
you? Yeah, I was gonna say, listening. What do you want to see? You want to see some of those changes being made, put in
Yes,
manifestos.
basically.
You want to see a
Okay.
commitment to some of those ideas.
Yes, so it's not just me saying words and they're just sitting there listening to what I have to say. You know,
But
I'm
would
seeing
you
action.
would you also accept people taking your suggestions and recommendations and playing back to you why they can't work at the moment and what they're putting in place as an alternative?
If it actually makes sense, then yeah, of course, you know, feedback is good.
The keys gotta make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Eh?
No, I was just trying to find out what you mean by listening, because sometimes listening could be, I hear you,
Yeah,
I hear
exactly.
you.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
sometimes forums are created, but they're just created to tick a box. Sometimes, right?
Yes,
yeah.
because
And
allow
There's
other
more
persons to
than
see
that.
that how hey we're getting the youth involved, but we're just speaking, and you know they're not actually taking our ideas and putting them into action.
no, 100% agree with that. Zico, you were gonna come in earlier on something.
Um, I was thinking of a bit of a okay, like I was trying to come up with an example to I think demonstrate power imbalances to Khalil.
Mm.
um, so I was
I have one
thinking of
that somebody picked me
like
up
a
of
Me
that
Too
for that.
example, right? Very often, you know, when women come forward with perhaps Me Too stories, right? People ask, you know, why she didn't do that sooner, or some people, if they accept that it did happen, they might start to ask questions about, well, why was she dressed provocatively? Did she invite that type of attention, right?
Mm.
What I want to highlight, in why the reason I bring this up is because in those cases, right, there will always be women who will dress more provocatively, right? So coming up with rules to try to police how women dress isn't going to solve the problem. The
Wow.
problem is the wealthy
Small.
man abusing his power, right?
Correct.
That is the problem.
Correct.
The way women dress, that's a variable. How long they choose to take to come forward, because of there's so many factors to consider where that's concerned. That's a variable. These things are all variables. You can tweak these variables. You can school. You can say whatever, do whatever. But at the end of the day, as long as they are wealthy, powerful men, they are always going to find victims, right?
Hmm.
You cannot.
That
Well,
They're always going to find victims. So the only way to solve the problem is to try to put some structure in place so that these men who have the power are scared, and they
So
have to move
thwart,
cautiously,
right? You're
and they
trying to
have to
thwart
watch
or
what they
change
do,
that
right?
power behavior.
Yeah, there's a
that's
power
an
imbalance. So with the
that's
politicians and
entirely
There
different
is a power.
analogous.
there is a power imbalance. We cannot legislate. All we can do is vote, and we've already established here that when you go to the ballot box, you're not even voting for your MPs. You're only voting for a prime minister. All we do is vote once every 5 years, and then for 5 years, the people elected have free reign to do practically whatever the people they want, which is why there needs to be very
Strong
strong
advocacy.
yes, strong
Very
advocacy,
strong.
yes, but also systems in place that are
Hmm.
Systems,
set up,
legislation,
Yep.
and
levers
stuff
that can be
that's
Correct.
pulled.
keeping them. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
what
not
we
just
really,
legislation, the actual execution of that legislation, because there's a lot of legislation on the books that people do not pay attention to because no one
true.
cares.
Or
so
at least a
all of
No,
our
start to the
problems are systemic.
legislation.
The
Correct.
It's all systemic.
I like those points. Hold on, Khalid, before we get back down in that conversation again, because we had a lot of conversation there. I get your point, Zico. The analogy, I'll be honest with you, though I get the point. The
Hmm.
analogy, I gotta see it. I'm reaching for it because I get the
You
point
don't
you're
see the
trying to make, if
connection
you
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the analogy and the thing we call talking is
because
this
so the
is
reason I
the
bring
thing.
I
But I
bring it
get it. I
up.
get where you're trying to go with it.
I thought the
Let's say,
analogy was fine.
okay. Let's say political platforms. I take it you probably listened to a few in this season. Um,
I will
what
admit I have not listened to as
you have
many
not
as
listened to a few.
I have not.
You- Okay, so we're gonna come back to it. But what you have heard has it? I'm assuming then that what you've heard has not encouraged you to listen to more.
I know I have not been impressed.
You have not, and why is that?
One, we have a serious culture where we shout to get a point across. You don't need to scream at someone to get your point across. You can speak and modulate your voice, and the point will get across is just the same way. So you don't need to shout at someone. So we need to move away from that. Also, again, we say things without substance. We say, I can do this, and if you put me back in power, I will do that. And then we put you in power and you don't do it. You don't start, you don't even, you probably haven't even thought about those words since you got into this said power. So to me, it's be a lot of hot air, a lot of theatrics, a lot of show. And I
Young
feel
people
like
tired
we
of it.
haven't, yes, I feel like we haven't moved away from it because it has worked in the past.
It's not new
And
pollen.
it we here in the region, we do not move away from things when it works. We don't see that a system is slowly breaking down until it has completely been broken, and then we
Collapse.
have to start from scratch.
Correct.
So we can't see that this is really a waste. And the comments, as Christopher said earlier, the comments that would have been said 10 years ago that you are still making today, you need to move forward in how you think. Society has gone forward. We've moved past these things. Nobody cares about anybody's sexual orientation
Correct.
or the color of anybody's skin. Nobody's interested in if a woman could do it better than a man or if a man could do
Correct.
it better than a woman. You need to move forward from these things. You need to put action behind your words.
Yep.
All of this is not, and to me it has before, like maybe like 2 weeks ago I would have said a lot of young people I've seen are not um, interested in voting, but due to these said spot meetings, I feel like a lot of people have realized the importance of their vote and the importance of stopping certain people from getting into government with these types of
But
statements.
you see, Lachey, that's the thing I have the problem with. We have been voting for a long time out of fear rather than out of confidence. We
But
are
I guess,
afraid of a
uh-huh.
certain party getting in, and I'm not saying you're even wrong for thinking that. That's how I've been voting for a long time. But when was the last time we voted because we were confident in the person we're voting for, as opposed to afraid for the alternative?
I guess because we've always been between a rock and a hard place. We
Yes,
have we have independents and we have, other parties coming up. But we know in our society it's either the Barbados Labour Party or the Democratic Labour Party. So for us, it's always been the better of the bad. We always choose the better of the
the
worst.
lesser of
You
the
know
two
which,
evils.
yes, that's how we vote, and it's not right, but
It's sad and
sadly
it
that's the
is
position we're in. And I think
Interesting.
that's
it's
the position
frustrating.
we're definite. That's how we ended up with the 30-0. And sad to say,
Yep,
but that's the position we are still in because after all of this time, the opposition has not put anything in place to give you any type of
nothing.
confidence in them.
Nothing, nothing,
So,
nothing. The last 3 years, to me, they have not utilized it to build back confidence in anything that they're doing. It feels as though they haven't learned from any mistakes of the last election, which is
and
sad.
the
Okay.
30-0 is the best time to start
Yeah.
from scratch. You have
Yep.
you could rebuild your whole brand, your whole party, and you did not capitalize on it at all. You came
Yep.
back with some of the same old faces that people do not want to see.
According to the leader of the Democratic Labour Party on one of the same Twitter spaces, she said that they did some polls that gave them the information and the data to say that some of the persons they brought back, persons regretted their vote and the way they lost these persons, and that's why they brought them. I'm
Hey,
literally just giving
nobody
her.
that vote for Dennis Law ain't put no Twitter space. I could tell you that there no.
No,
No.
no, no. She was not. No, no,
Sorry.
no. Whatever polls, I don't know where she did the polls, which is something that a group of my friends were talking about. Who was the demographic that she polled?
That's
Number
Oh,
another
one.
oh, I
thing.
thought you said you did the poll on Twitter.
No,
Oh,
Yeah,
she
okay.
was
yeah.
on a Twitter
Uh-huh.
space,
I was
giving
on
that
Twitter
as
space.
the
Oh, okay.
reason why they brought back certain people. You could take
I'm
that
with you.
That's
however you
another
take it.
thing. How we gather information.
Correct.
Because I have never heard of this poll before.
Me neither.
Where how do you get it? Do you go out house to house? Do you post things on social media? How do you gather this information? And would you say it's a good way of gathering this information?
Correct.
Are you just contented with,
To
how
be fair,
you've done it
both
before?
parties tend to use very similar ways of gathering infiltration,
So I have noticed.
whether it be hiring independent pollsters and what have you. So it's very similar. Even here, sometimes you see things and you say they've spoken to the community. I'm like, not one person have come to my door. I don't even know, I don't know what they're talking about. But
I
that's
think there are different outlets to get to talk to the country, to talk to the people. And I feel like we do not utilize all of them. We don't utilize social media. We don't put things in the paper. I know for a fact my grandmother has no type of social media, but I know she reads the paper every day. She listens to the news. Do you put things out there for everybody, or are you just sticking to your set of people?
good
There's
point
a
that you're
sample
making there,
bias.
because on social media, Khalil, has the role of social media helped you in getting information about your local political situation, or do you find that for lack of a better term, that our parties, our politicians are utilizing social media to reach the youthful demographic
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah,
in a
certainly.
meaningful way?
That was an important qualifier. That
Gotta put it in.
Yeah, no, no, certainly. Since I remember in 2013 they began to stream, the Barbados Labour Party began to stream some of their meetings. And then 2018 and this election particularly, you have seen a significant engagement on both sides on the social media. The extent to which it is meaningful, beyond memes or streaming of
Well, that's a
meetings.
personal thing. That's a personal thing. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry?
No, I said the meaningful is a personal way how you
Yeah,
interpret
exactly.
what you're
Absolutely.
Exactly.
receiving.
Exactly. So beyond the memes and the streaming of the meetings, um, I really can't say in terms of what more has been done. That's not my forte.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I can't say what more has been done there. But what I will say, not to harp on the point, just my final point on this matter about the Me Too analogy, that I thought it was entirely disanalogous, because the length of the woman's dress or skirt, is unrelated entirely, from the assault perpetrated. It's a convenient excuse, perhaps.
That's my
But
point, though.
That was the point.
no,
That
but
personal
I
no,
think that's the
no.
point he was making.
When
But
responsibility being
when
used by
when
people with power.
someone says, "I want $5,000. I want a television. I want this. I want that," that is directly related to the other thing. So it isn't an independent variable. That is
Do you know what
directly
type of
related to that. But we're not gonna
Yeah,
harp on that.
but if
yeah,
But
both
yeah.
every
sides
every
decided
time,
they're not giving it to them,
exactly, you can say
if both
no.
of them said no, and this is the problem, we are scared that you're going to say no and the other side is going to say yes. But if there was something really strong and meaningful that deterred both sides from saying no, then persons are forced to vote for other reasons, de facto
And
or
that is the point.
meaningfully.
Yes, 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 yes.
But
I agree
I
with
think we
that.
agreeing on
that's
certain things. It's
the
just
next problem.
the I
Certain
think what
things are
we
being lost in translation.
Yeah.
not just and I think it's the equivalency that we place on each situation. I think is where the disagreement is. I think we agree that stuff needs to be done, but they're not of equal measure, of equal. One has a lot more weighting than the other in certain, and I think that's where that conversation is being we continue with that debate, but we can continue that a little bit later. I thought it was interesting that you were saying, Lachey, about what's coming off the platforms of what young people would like to hear or expect to hear and don't want to hear, quite frankly. Media, because I think the political theater around the world. In our case, we like our spot meetings, and then we got the big meetings in the US. might have the big halls and stadiums, and the guys just talking and the crowd going mad. Here you might have the smaller meetings in the grounds, and all over the world have a way of how they conduct campaigns. I would say that the politicals meetings are rarely where you get substance and policy. You get some,
Exactly.
but you
Exactly.
rarely get that. Where you get that is where when now people might use the different media, the pages and what have you. But you also get it by the media interrogating what's being said, what's being
Hmm.
written, asking direct and really purposeful questions
which
without
is a
any
whole
agenda
different.
or what
It's a
have you.
whole different thing.
Exactly. So I wondered for you, and then let's go to Antoine and bring in Jamaica, and then we can come back to Barbados. Do you find the because I think Barbados is a special case in compared to other Caribbean islands, where most Caribbean islands have when I think about television, a number of different media houses.
Hmm.
Barbados, for all we like to talk, we still got one. You understand, and that's probably part of the problem. But Antoine, in Jamaica, do you find the media is helping young people navigate this whole political forest and get through the weeds and understand what's happening, topics, issues, people, impact, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I strongly believe so. Even now, here listening to you guys, understanding the different perspectives and what is happening in Barbados and other countries. It allows persons, youth especially, to realize what is happening and know where we stand as well, and to actually know where to take the government accountable as well, and to see you know our rights as citizens, basically. And to be honest, I've actually used the media more to get up to date with all these political things, and and to also understand them as much as I can. And it also influenced a lot of youths to to say, okay, I'm either going to vote for this party, based on what I'm reading on the social media, or I'm going to go for this one, based on what I'm also seeing.
And Zico, I know, again, when it comes to politics, I always say Trinidad is a special place in comparison to everywhere else in the Caribbean. I mean, there's no doubt. The media's role in helping society, and of course, we're talking about young people now, and so language and the way the different media they use to communicate and different platforms is important. But do you find the media in Trinidad is helping, is hindering, is they're taking their place in helping people navigate that space?
So this is a very contentious issue right now. Um, there is an appearance of the current administration being at loggerheads with the media at large. Um, there have been a lot of interactions at press conferences and such where the representatives of the administration would get into fights or squabbles with the media that then um, ripple forward onto into social media spats and whatnot. And there are different opinions. Some people feel as though there's an infringement upon the freedom of the press, whereas other people feel as though the press has been irresponsible. And I understand both sides of this argument. Me personally, I've always been a strong advocate of um, the freedom of the press to do its job, and that the government doesn't really have a role to play in regulating what the press writes and doesn't write. That's always been my position. But I understand both sides, especially within the context of the advent of social media
Hmm.
and its the removal of the traditional gatekeepers, which would have been legacy media. So the media does technically have a very important role to play. Whether or not it's actually living up to that is a different conversation. But the media's role
Well, that's
now
the question. Do you
is
think they're
more
living up to
no.
your expectation? That's the question.
I think they could do better, but I think that even missing the target, I believe that they are playing a critical role because social media has opened the floodgates. It has removed the gatekeepers, and we have digital migrants who are totally incapable of distinguishing between real news, fake news, legitimate sources,
That's an important
illegitimate
issue.
sources. Anybody can pick up a cell phone, set up a studio, spread memes and WhatsApp. People, there is so much fake news. So even with the media falling short in the eyes of many, right? The media is still doing providing a yeoman service in a sort of a media landscape where 50% of what people are sharing on any given day is just patently false, misleading, mischievous. So I believe that the media is playing a critical role. I get that there needs to be pressure on the media to do better because, of course, media strives to not be to not be biased. But what's really happening is that in many cases they're appearing to not be biased.
No.
But it's still they still play a really critical role. Yeah.
Crystal, Barbados. As I say, Barbados to me is a special case when it comes to the media
Everybody's
stuff.
special.
Well, in different regions, different ways, right? Because again, from a television perspective, there's still one television station. Now, one can argue that with social media and the ability to go direct now, that is neither here nor there these days. However, you still want certain gatekeepers that are able to interrogate and ask intelligent questions and really hold people to account, whether you're in government or trying to become government. You still want people that are able to scrutinize. To you in Barbados, you got CBC in radio, you got VOB and CBC again, and then you got Advocate Nation, Barbados Today in there, which I would say are the five main traditional media houses in Barbados. Do you find collectively that they are doing a good job at helping young people wade through this stuff?
I'll give a recent example to hopefully bring the point. We would have had an issue which actually touched some other Caribbean countries in terms of vaccines that were acquired
Oh,
through
yes,
a
yes.
company that
Yes, yes.
the name alone, for any person who was listening, the name alone rang so many red flags.
It's quite
Scam.
radical.
And it was like I was listening to this, and the first time I heard it, I thought that somebody was just putting some kind of false news out there because it just sounded so stupid. Only to realize this is a real thing that
Exactly.
our countries got involved with. And to get the real story about what happened, the Virgin Island
Turks and
Consortium
Caicos
is one who
Consortium.
had to break that story. And I mean, the level of detail they went into, including having discussions with the auditors who would have advised against getting into this contract in the first place and having them ignored, having only one signatory on the contracts and all of these other humongous red flags that to me, even as a professional, you don't need to be a professional to be able to see that this just smelled terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to rely on the Virgin Island Consortium to get the details, in spite of all of those names that you called. And it's
Yes.
not only limited to that. There was an issue where our the constituency's personal identifiable information was uploaded to our government information website, and all of the ramifications that come along with that. The newspaper, there were persons, professionals in my professional body, in other professional bodies from an IT perspective, audit perspective, everywhere, that spoke on how dangerous that was and how the consequences could have an impact on every single citizen whose
Yep.
name and information was on that list. Where was the big write-up? I have one friend who's a professional who had to force his way into our papers, and he got a very tiny article inside of the Nation, as opposed to then a Chris Sinclair who makes a statement about a politician and gets front page news. And these are the kind of things that makes it disingenuous in terms of how information is put out there for citizens to digest, for us to get a real picture as to the real issues. Why then social media is going to play a role in terms of influencing people one way or another, because persons who have decided that they're not going to sit down and listen to a politician drag on for an entire night, but they can get a 2-minute clip of what may be an unfortunate situation, they're going to form an opinion based on those things, whether you like it or not. So
Yeah.
even if this person spoke for an hour and had 58 minutes of brilliant commentary, their entire discourse is going to be reduced to those 2 minutes because of the power that social media plays, and because mainstream media has not stepped up to the plate to dissect the information and be able to say these are the main points. And I am not even going to excuse the parties that have those 2 minute fall ups, because the reality is they really need to do better, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
But the media needs to play a part in making sure that the bigger issues are have a focus, so that persons can
Yes.
make informed decisions and not just emotional decisions based on a 2 minute excerpt.
Stop being reporters and start being journalists is what I tend to say.
Correct.
Khalil, I know you're gonna
I
go soon, so I want to come to you quickly on this point.
Yes. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to. This will be the final thing I have to say. I really have
Yeah,
to
I know you
run.
got it. I know you
I'm
got to run.
behind. Yes.
Yes.
So what I will say, and it is a position from which I shan't retreat, is that in all sectors of the society, we need to do better, all of us, and that is the bottom line. And definitely the political class, definitely the business class, without doubt, but all of us. And I think too that we owe it to young people to bring political history into the classroom. I'm a keen student of political history, and that little short time has informed the belief that life isn't really about perfection. And I understand, therefore, that many of us who are my age have a desire for an idealized world, and that is justifiable, and that is rightly so. We should always demand better, and better must be sought. That's how you get any real change. A survey of the political history of Barbados, for example, will highlight that, quite apart from perfection, you have one side which is always generally better, and does better. And so that it isn't, I don't think it's so much about voting out of a position of fear, but a vote of confidence in the fact that life isn't perfect, but that it is about doing the best you can with what you have. And it is, and sometimes I think that we lose that very real reflection on life. Sometimes we lose that. And it is on that particular point that I would want now to depart.
I know. Look, Khalil, thank you so much for joining.
It was
Look, I know.
good.
I think everyone would say, look, your contributions were welcomed and added so much to the debate that we just had. So thank you so much for joining us, guys in the audience. Please thank Khalil for joining. Thanks, Khalil. We really appreciate you taking the time
Thank you
today.
for having me.
Hey, not
Thank you
at
for
all,
having
not
me.
at all. It's good. But we're gonna wrap up pretty soon as well. Look, I really thought this conversation was really, really, really good to understand where young people are at, where they're thinking, how they actually see politics. And I hope people in the audience, the middle aged folks, as someone referred to us as, and young people in the audience as well, really listen. As Anton was saying, but not just listen, but really put some things into action to address the issues that young people care about.
Yeah.
The old guys in politics and stuff now, what you do now is not for you. What you legislate now is for these young people and their children. So you got to listen to what they're saying. And you want to make sure that, as Lachey said, that what you do isn't from a position of personal or even party, but for the country and for generations to come. I really think that that's the case, that we need to be thinking of. Phil?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot from you, your young, youthful voices as well. I think what for me, what I'm going to go away and ponder a lot is what could the future look like. I think that's one of the big questions you ponder when you get younger voices together, because we are thinking about what could the next 20 years look like, or what should it look like. Khalil talked about having an ideal world, and I also support that. You should have this ideal vision and work towards it. But accept imperfection and living with imperfection. So thank you all for all your contributions and
Yeah,
what has been quite a
I really think
civil
it.
discussion.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it. But before we go, just one thing, and just literally two sentences from everybody, and we're gonna finish with Lachey because it's your first time voting. But Zico, from you first, two sentences. What do you want to see from the political systems in Trinidad and Tobago?
Constitutional reform.
Okay.
That's easy. Constitutional reform. Good, Antoine.
I must say more action, basically. You know, I
Action.
want to see more things in action, not just word of mouth.
So stop the hot air and put stuff in action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Crystal.
More honest discourse. If you promise something and it couldn't happen, explain to the people why it couldn't happen for the things that you're doing. Don't let them just fall off the plate without explanation. Hold yourselves accountable.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. And Lachey, voting for the first time in 3 days' time.
I would like to see integrity being shown, transparency, and action behind your words.
Well, powerful.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Look, guys, I really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us for a couple of hours here in the living room. It's been a fantastic conversation. We touch on so many things. I love the debate and the back and forth because I think that's what's needed sometimes. And sometimes, sometimes you can have a short form conversation where it's just question and response. But I find you don't always get to the meat and what people really thinking and concerning. But with a little back and forth discussion with people from right around the region, sometimes I think you can get some good conversation going and some actionable points as well. And I think a lot of actionable points came out today. So look, we want to thank you guys for joining us here in the living room. As usual, guys, in the comments, thank our guests for coming here with us and having a conversation. It's been really a good conversation. And that's that Didi said.
One leave your front house untidy.
I agree, Didi. These are good young people. They won't use the front house untidy.
Yeah.
Now, guys, thank you
Definitely
so
good.
much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having us.
Not at all.
Yes.
Really like that conversation, man.
That was hot. That was good. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I like that. I like having those kind of open, honest conversations where people aren't afraid to speak their minds and say what they want to say. Because to me, that's how you get to the meat of the matter sometimes when it comes to these things, man. You got to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because sometimes we might not think that people at that age have a lot of opinions or are really churning and giving a lot of thought to what's going on, but they obviously are.
They
And
are.
it's good to bring those points out, and it does remind us of what we were like at that age as well. Well, I wasn't using words like anecdotal.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think a little bit like Khalil, I always liked politics. So from young, I was always kind of interested and reading and looking and stuff like that. But it's good to see when people are interested. I guess people might say they're not interested, but I guess the question always comes back to what is politics? Because I think sometimes folks may not understand the impact that politics is having on so many areas of their life and in society. And even though they might use words like, well, I'm really interested in politics. Actually, you are. You just ain't calling it politics, but you are.
Yeah,
And if
I
you
wonder-
aren't, politics interested in you.
Yeah, I wonder if that word not that phrase not interested means something else, as in that this is I'm fine. I don't have a passion for what I'm seeing going on. It's probably what that not interested mean, but they are interested in other things.
No, I agree. I agree. And as I say, and the other things are often impacted by politics or legislation or policy and what's not in some form or fashion. So I think it was good. I think it was a really, really, really good conversation. I really like it. So I guess the question is, you're going to be continue. You've been watching these stump speeches and these spot meetings and stuff for the week.
Not live.
Not like,
Definitely not
well,
live.
I gotta confess, I watch a few minutes live in the evening, and then I watch the rest the next day. And for people like me that live in the diaspora, even though we don't have the opportunity to vote, again, something that you all should fix,
Work it out.
politicians. Work it out. Other countries have. Why can't we? But I still like to pay attention, and I must admit, I like the theater of elections. I like that kind of stuff. I don't like, as the guys were saying, some of the content and where people get very personal or denigrate people because of their sex, religion, sexual preferences, or what have you,
Yeah.
color of their skin, and that kind of. I hate that nonsense. But I like the sometimes fiery nature of it all, and people just trying to. I like the theater of it all. I like that kind of thing. But above all, I also look at what are you proposing? What are you seriously proposing?
Exactly,
As far
yeah.
as policy and legislation as well. That's when
Yeah.
I get down in the detail. That was actually determine my vote, so to speak, more so than the and who using a LCD screen at the back versus
Yeah.
who using a picture that hang up with wires.
Yeah.
That's the, that's the kind of
For
thing.
me, the interesting thing has been just watching was actually speaking in a different way. I'm always keen to see different forms of leadership, right? And different types of voices and people who are getting passionate about different types of concerns other than the obvious, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I like to see. And of course, looking at the manifestos, I'm probably not going to read the manifestos like you have.
Which is a
I'll go through
question I was.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna
and
ask that question just now. The guys when they were here, I forgot to ask it,
that would
because I
have
saw
been
time getting
yeah,
away.
that would have been
You know,
fascinating to see.
are they interested in manifestos and do they read manifestos?
Yeah.
That was a question I had to ask, but then time got
And
away.
are the manifestos presented in the various ways that would be accessible and consumable by the entire population?
Well,
Electorate.
it's funny you say that, because there seemed to be a real issue this election cycle with manifesto accessibility, despite all the different avenues that you could get manifestos, whether it be digital, print, and what have you. It seems like folks are moving away from print and using digital, but they seem to be hiding really linkers to get this thing. Although I saw one of them was leaked. I think the DLP manifesto was leaked early, but it had a couple of errors in it, and people were using it. That kind of stuff I don't necessarily like. I understand it's just a little bit of political quote unquote fun at times, but that kind of thing don't really get me. Manifestos, do I read them? I actually do read manifestos, but I don't read it. It more tells me,
Yeah,
yeah, it more tells me where a party's head is at
exactly. Yeah,
than I actually believe in that they're gonna do all the
that is what they're
things
going to do.
that
Yeah,
they're gonna do.
but it does at least tell you this is what they collectively came together and spent time and emotion saying these are the things that we believe the public might be interested in and could win us votes. That's what
Well,
it is.
yeah, but yeah, exactly that. But I want to see that you move beyond that. But you're
I
actually
agree.
doing things in the interest of the country that's gonna set us up. Those things that were missed in the last 55 years, are you going to put things in place to ensure they're not missed going forward? Is there a long-term plan and not just a strategy, but then is there implementation plan and mechanism to do these things? And that's where I look at. And when I look at the two mechanisms, two manifestos, I would say, for me, the in my opinion, Democratic Party manifesto is one that is clearly the manifesto is such that I don't. It's not one that was written with the expectancy that they will win government.
Really?
That's my view,
Okay. Well.
right? That's not to say it was a bad manifesto. It's just the way how it was written. It was okay. You guys know that you're not winning this election, kind of stuff. For me, then on the other side now, on the Barbados Party manifesto, Barbados Party manifesto seemed like if everybody get in a room and so let me brainstorm all the possible things that we might want to do or that anybody in the country or any special interest group might want, and let me put it on the whiteboard. And then they run out of time, and instead of then decomposing that, they put all the whole whiteboard in the manifesto. So it full up everything that you could possibly think about. Again, still with very little implementation strategy or implementation plan. So in my opinion, it looked good, yes. It's saying some good things, yes. But do I think it? No. And when I look at it in the long run, it tells me that you're just trying to cover every single base that you possibly could, rather than actually giving me a concrete developmental plan. That is different. So so on that level, that's why I say they're not even in terms of content, but they're even in terms of how I perceive the actions that were put into it to put it together. So that's the way how I look at things. That's just me. I know everybody out there can look at things different. Some people can tell me, "Man, you mad? How you can look at this and compare it with that?" I get it. That's your view. I just look at things slightly differently. That is just me. But you should go and read them, man. Go and read the manifesto. See what people head at.
Yeah, exactly. I will read it. Right?
For me, it's really just to see what people head at. Are you on the pulse? Are you on the ball? And the one thing I would say that both parties tend to miss is the whole COVID recovery and how we coming out of COVID, which is the immediate thing now that we're dealing with. How we coming out of that? How we dealing with schools? How we getting children back out? What is that plan? Because that's the immediate thing that you got to deal with now as soon as this election get out of the way.
That's an interesting one. It's sort of that seems like a tactical thing.
But it's an important tactical thing for now.
It's an important tactical thing, but you could also argue that COVID touches everything. So anything you address is impacted by COVID. So why treat it as a special case? It is the case.
Yeah, good point.
Right. So that's one argument that they could use there as well. But I agree. It would come over a lot more authentic and honest if it was very clear up front. This is the problem that we have. This is how we are looking to deal with it.
Exactly. I think so. But look, hey guys, thank you very much for staying with us here in the living room. As usual, we ask you, hit share. Everyone that's listening, hit share and let as many people in your network be part of this conversation. You guys had the benefit of being part of it live. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for staying with us for the past couple of hours. But let's bring your network into the conversation and see what our young people are saying. See what they're thinking about. See what's important to them. What's keeping them up at night and where they would like to see our countries, because we had Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad in today, our countries, where they would like to see our Caribbean countries go in the future from a development perspective and from a political perspective as well. So thank you guys for staying with us. It's been fantastic having you with us. We will do something on election night in Barbados. Don't know what that is yet, but we will do something and we will let you know. So until next time, see you later.
Ciao.
Ooh, that was good.